Well, good day. I'm back. Today, with this drawing, we're going to be talking about stairs. I got a set of stairs to build for a client. It's going down in his basement. So pretty much, depending on your calculations, every set of stairs is going to be a bit different. There's a lot of stuff to take in consideration when you're building stairs. First thing, it'd be nice to have either a construction calculator like Construction Master, Construction Master Pro. You can even, they're $100 and some odd, or you can even get the app for your smartphone. And it's only, I think it's 54 bucks or something like that. Some might be cheaper, some might be more expensive depending on what one you want to get. I got the one on my phone, but I can't show it to you because I'm using my phone for the video. So when it comes to all of this, there's a few things that you definitely got to keep in mind. Now, when you're going to build a set of stairs, it's always rise and run, and then everything works off 90 degrees. That'll give you your angles and everything too. I got it all drawn out here. Now, typically, you cut these stringers at a lumber, but I don't like doing that because lumber warps and it splits and breaks. So what I like to do is, for the stringers, I use 3/4 inch plywood. I laminate two pieces together to make 1.5 inches, and I cut them out and then I screw them together, and it gives me 1.5 inch thick stringer. So we're going to be using plywood, and then I got 1 inch plywood for the treads that I'm going to be using, and 1/2 inch plywood for the risers. Now, I said treads, but in carpentry terms or specifying, it's rise and run. So the rise is when you're coming up plumb, and the run is when you're going in and out level. And that's your rise and your run, and it's also known as tread. This here is also known as tread, but this is always rise. Now, you need to know your, over here, this is, so what I'm working on is an unfinished ceiling basement, but the main floor is finished with flooring. So, and that'll be known as your main floor thickness. So basically what it is, on the top of the finished floor that you actually walk on, to the underside of your bare floor joists. No drywall or nothing like that. It's all underside is just the bare floor joists. So you need to know, and that's called the ceiling height. You need to know that, and that's basically right from the concrete floor right up to the underside of the floor joist. You need to know that height. And then you need to know your main floor thickness. So that'd be from the underside of the floor joist to the material that you're walking on. You got to know that. When you get that figured out, so mine right now is 100 inches. And that's right from the concrete floor to the top where you walk, what you're walking on. I got 8'4", which is 100 inches. Over here, from the concrete floor to the underside of the floor joists, I got 89 3/4, 7'5" 3/4, and the thickness of my floor is 10 1/4 inches. So now I know my overall rise, which is 8'4". Then I got to know my overall run. Now, you also got to keep in mind that when you're figuring out your overall run for where your stairs are going to land, you also got to remember about your headroom rise. Now, your headroom rise is from the nosing of your tread or your run right out on the nosing, plumb straight up, you've got to have by code 6 foot 8 inches. Now, some provinces or where, you know, or states, wherever you're located, some of these codes could vary. So you're going to have to know all of that before you even start your calculations. You've got to know, because there's, in Canada, here in Alberta, the Alberta Building Code, we have a maximum rise, and this is a maximum rise right here, maximum 7 7/8 inches, or 200 millimeters. And then we have a minimum run, or minimum tread, minimum run, which is the smallest you can go. The minimum is 8 1/4 inches. Now, obviously, we're not going to be building steers with an 8 1/4 inch tread, because that's not big enough for anybody to stand on comfortably. So once you know all of this, then you can start to figure out what your rise and run and everything else is going to be. So right now, you start off roughly, you get your 100 inches. You get your 100 inches. Now you want to know, how many rises are you going to have? So if you're going to have 12, 13, 14, 15, depending on where you're to, you might have 2 sets of steers. A set of steers, a landing, and another set of steers, because you might have to turn. So you got to take all of this in consideration. Here, we're just going to have a straight run. It's just one straight run. So what I do is I take my 100 inches and I divide it by, on my construction calculator, I type in 100 inches and then I divide that by 7 1/2 inches. That's my starting point to see what I'm going to need. And 7 1/2 inches, well then 7 1/2, it gave me, I can't remember what it was now, 7 1/2, it gave me 12 and 6.6 something, I think it was. So obviously I wanted to round up to the next one, which would be 13. So now I'm figuring out, okay, 100 inches divided by 13 gave me 7 11/16. So my rise is going to be 7 11/16 rise. Now, this is where you start to figure out some calculations. There's a formula for steers. There's 2 types you can use. It's 1 rise plus 1 run equals 18 inches. Example right here. So 1 rise plus 1 run equals 18 inches. Or you can have 2 rises, which is 1, 2, plus 1 run, which is 1, can equal anywhere between 22 to 26 inches. So that's your 2 formulas you can use. This one here, this second one, is the one that I always use, because it gives me a better calculation to play with the depths of treads or runs that I need, that's going to clear me with my headroom. Because the more you go bigger with your tread, the more your steers are coming out this way, and then you could lose your headroom here, and then you're against code. Because the code here in Alberta Building Codes is 6 foot 8 inches. Excuse me. So here's the example here. 7 11/16 plus 10 5/16 equals 18 inches. This one is no good to me, because 10 5/16, because the way this floor was built in the beginning, this house was built in 1968, and the way the floor was built, the codes were different back then, and now they're changed, and due to safety, something like this can't be grandfathered in. So luck is enough that have it where this wall is to. This is just part of a landing in the house, because the way the upstairs are, I can actually, because originally he only got 104 inches across here. That's not enough. I'll never, the tread will be 9.5 inches, 9.25 inches, and I don't like building them that small because that's uncomfortable to stand on. So because the way his house was built, I'm lucky enough that they never built it correctly. I can actually cut this way and go back. I can move it back to give me the headroom that I want for the size of tread that I need to use. Now, a lot of circumstances you're not going to be able to do that, but hopefully the way steer well openings are made, and hopefully in your case, if you're going to build a set of steers going in your basement, you have a big enough of a steer well opening to be able to do it. Now in my case, I need 8 foot and 8 inches because of this depth right here, and this sloping with the stairs, measuring off this point, will give me my 6 foot 8 inches, and I clears that point and I'm good. So I'm able to move that back, but a lot of times you're not going to be able to. So you got to be careful in your calculations. So I'm going to be using 7 11/16 rise, and I'm going to have 13 rises. Now the 13 rises is not going to be cut out of all of this. When you're cutting them, you're only going to cut out 12, because the 13th rise is going to be from your last run up to the main floor. So you just don't draw out on your material 13 rises and then put them up, because if you do, this tread here is going to be up, or this run is going to be up level with your floor, and you don't want to be doing that. Some stairs where you're going to install them, you could do that, but technically this is the right way to do it. So you just got to eliminate, when you're cutting it out, you know you're going to have 13 rises, so you only got to cut out 12. Now, so when I'm doing my calculations here now, 7 11/16 rise, and that's 13 rises, so I need 12 runs, which is 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12. That's my 12 runs right there. Now you take the rise and the run, so I'm going to be a 7 11/16 rise. So now I'm going to go 10-inch run. Now I only got 9 right there, and I'll explain that in a second. 7 11/16 rise with a 10-inch run, and I got it right here. Steer run 10 inches, steer rise 7 11/16. To figure this out, this is where you need to know your run right here, your overall run, and that's going to tell you basically what you need. I have 8 foot 8 inches now, and that's giving me my head clearance. That's my minimum head clearance, so that's where the steers are going to end. So I know I need overall run 8 foot 8 inches. So that's 8 foot 6, or 8 foot 8. I'm sorry, 8 foot 8. So now 8 foot 8 divided by 12 will give you 10 inches. Oh, you got 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12. So we got 12 runs. So 12 times 10 obviously is 120. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So that's 120. Now, this would be number 13 up here, but he's not counted in the calculation. So, now, when you're going to cut this out, and you're going to use a framing square, which I'll show you, when you're going to cut this out, you set one stop on your square at 7 11/16. You set the other stop at 9 inches, because 1 inch of your tread that you're going to install got to hang out over, which is called your nosing, which is right here. When you're doing that calculations to figure out your degrees and everything else, because I'm going to be cutting this out on a miter saw instead of a skill saw, I need to know my degrees, and I'm cutting it out. I'm only cutting out 9 inches instead of 10 because the other inch is hanging out over it to give me a 1 inch nosing. So that's pretty much everything that you pretty much need to know about installing or building stairs, and what you need to know. Now, you also want to know, okay, how long of material do I need? Well, the material that you're going to need to figure that out, once you know what your rise and your run is on your construction calculator. So, for example, in your construction calculator, you put in 100 inches. And then 108 inches, because that's what we got here, 108 inches. You put in your, you put in your 100 inches rise, and then your 108 inch run, and then you press diagonal, and that'll give you a measurement. And that measurement is from right here to right here. That's what that measurement is. And mine will be 12 foot and 9/32. So 12 foot, so I know now that I'm going to need 14 feet of material to be able to cut this out, because you also want a little bit for using your square. So I'm going to show you. So now you're going to need a good framing square. Now you can buy cheap ones on the market, 20 bucks, but trust me, they're not square. This one here is 100% square, and the only thing is, this is a $100 framing square. Now, to know a framing square, you hold it down on its flat like this. So basically, it's lodged down in front of you like this. This is the blade, this is the tongue, and this is the heel. Now, on the outside of the blade, the increments are in 1/16 of an inch. All across here and down across here. It's 1/16 of an inch. On the inside of the tongue and the inside of the blade, the increments are 1/8 of an inch. So when you're going to be setting up your square, you're going to use the outside edge of your square. And that's where you're going to figure out where you got to put your stops. Now, what I mean by stops are these little things. Are these. And that's the square stops. And that groove, that fits into the square. And you're going to need 2 of them. So basically you need 2. And it got a little on top that screws down. And that tightens it to the square. Now, when you're going to set it up, once you know that you're going to have 7 11/16 rise and a 9 inch run, but you're going to end up with a 10-inch because remember you got a 1-inch overhang for nosing. But on your square, you got to use 7 11/16 rise and a 9-inch run. So now when I'm setting it up, because I'm using a miter saw, now if you're going to cut it with a skill saw, that's fine and dandy, and you don't need to be particular which side you put what on. But where I'm using the miter saw and going to my right, it goes up to 60 degrees. Going to my left, it only goes to 50 degrees. And I want to make sure I can get enough. So I always do the rise on the tongue, or the run, I'm sorry. I always do the run on the tongue and the rise on the blade. So the run is 9 inches. So see if I can get this up closer and show you. See if I can get this up closer and show you. It's sitting on the square. And I'm going to slide that over to 9 inches. Screw it on and lock it. And then this one over here, I'll put it on. And I'm going to go to 7 11/16 and screw it on. Now, I'm just going to demonstrate over on a scrap piece how I'm going to do this out. Now, when I lodge this down, I'm going to make a couple of little adjustments because I like to make sure that they're perfectly dead on. And when I'm drawing them out, I don't use a pencil. I use a pen. And the reason I use a pen is because, again, where I'm going to be using the miter saw, and I want this to be 100% square, 100% straight, and with a pencil, as you're going, the pencil is wearing down and your line is getting fatter and fatter. Well, then, obviously, you can't be 100% accurate. But if you use a pen, the line is always the same size. And that way, then, you're going to be 100% pretty much dead accurate. And that's what I like. So I'm going to put this down. There. Now, hopefully, I don't know if I'm going to get close enough. I don't know if you're going to be able to see. I'll stay over here. So, again, this is the blade, and this is the tongue, and I got my stops. You see, I put my stops on. So now, the way this is going to go, you're going to hold it like this, and you're going to get the straight edge facing towards you, and you're just going to take this square and put it down like that. And that's going to give you a triangle shape. Now, I always start from me right and go to me left. Now, I want the 9-inch and the 7 11/16. I got that on the wrong one. Look, 7 11/16. Now, I always want them dead on the very edge, and that's why I like doing plywood. Now, this is not plywood. This is only particle board. I'm only using it for an example. I got all the plywood over here. So I like to have the numbers right dead on the sharp edge of the material. So I'll adjust my stops accordingly to get that where I want it. And I always also, when I loosen them, the square edges on the square stops, I always twist them a little bit so that they're sitting flat against the material. And then I move to get the 9 right on the dead edge of the material. And then I tighten that back down. And then I do the same thing over here. I just twist it a little bit. Make sure the 11/16 is right on the very sharp edge of the material. Make sure this one is still tight, not moving. And then I'll just slide this in and get that 7 11/16 right on the sharp edge of the material, and there we go. So now we got the rise here and the run that way. So now I'll just take my pin and actually I'll go right out further. I like to go right to the end of the material. That's a run. That's a rise. Now, you take and move down the line, and this rise line that you just marked, put your 9" right on that line. Right on it. Obviously, I'm not going to get my 12 risers and everything that it is. So but I'm just using for a demonstration. You know, I can't go any further because this one, it won't reach. So this is where we'll stop. Now, this is where some other things got to come into consideration of doing all of this. We're using 1" material for the run or the tread. It's a 1" material. So now, on your very first rise, if the material is going to be 1" and it's going to be sitting on top here, you got to take 1" off the bottom, because if you don't, your steers are not going to land correctly, because you got 7 11/16 here plus 1", which will be 8 11/16. So you got to cut 1" off to get, so that way then from there to the top of the tread or the rise is still 11 7/16. So what I do, I get me measuring tape, and I measure 1" up from the bottom, and then over here we go down, and it's supposed to be 7 11/16. So we're going to go to 6 11/16. Now you just take your square. Now you can take your stops off now, because you're not going to need them anymore after you get everything marked out on one piece. And you just draw a line right across, Now, maybe what I should do is I can darken them lines up. Now, that's so now you're going to have your 1" tread right here sitting on that. So then from this line to the top of your tread, it's going to be 7 11/16. So depending on what you're going to use for a tread, the thickness, that's going to depend on how much you cut off here. Now, this is the bottom sitting on the floor. Now, when you get up here to where your very last run is, because remember, you're only doing 12 rises, so 12, this one is 13, which you don't count, so you come here, so this is your last tread. Now what you do, you basically take your square right there and go to the back side you go to the back side of the last tread and you square up with the tread on down here and the rise up there. Get that square, and then you draw a line down across there. So now basically what will happen, this is cut off shorter here, you're coming up, this is your last 9 inches cut out, then you go straight down through there, and this here is what actually fastens to your main floor for your steers to fasten to. And then I'll tell you about the nailing flange that'll go on here to nail the steers in place. So I'm going to cut these out for you to show, and I just had my safety glasses. There they are. You can't forget your safety glasses, because again, I'm using the miter saw, but even with a skill saw you still should wear safety glasses. So I'm going to get ready to do this. Now again, I'll tell you about the degrees. So with the degrees, you don't take the 1 inch nosing in consideration when you're doing the degrees. So we know that we're having a 10 inch tread or a 10 inch run. You take off 1 inch, because that's what you're cutting out, 9 inches right here. So then you basically, in the construction calculator, 9 inch run, type in your 9 inch run, and then 7 11/16 rise, and then press diagonal, and again, that's what it'll give you. So 7 11/16 rise, 9 inch run. The pitch is 40.5 degrees plumb. The 40.5 degrees plumb is up and down this way. This is plumb. No matter what you're doing in life, this is plumb. So vertical is plumb. And then everything works with 90 degrees in life. So basically this is 90 degrees. That's 90 degrees. Now depending on what you're making, if you're going to make something into a circle, you got to work with 360 degrees. But here, this is 90 degrees. So once you find out what this degree is, which is 40.5 degrees plumb, then you put in 90 degrees, take away 40.5 degrees, will give you 49.5 degrees level, which is horizontal. So when you're talking about wants to level up something, level is horizontal, plumb is vertical. And then the diagonal of this, and that diagonal, because you can also get that diagonal is what's from here to here, or from here to here. This length and this length is the same. So now I know that I need to set my miter saw, and mitering to my right, which is the run. What am I doing here? Yeah, okay, no. Mitering to the right, which is my run, which is the level, I need 49.5 degrees. For the rise, for the plumb, I need 40.5 degrees. So I got 49.5, 40.5. So on the miter saw, where the degrees are marked, what I like to do, now you're not going to be able to see it, I put a piece of tape where my diagonals are going to be, where my miters are going to be, and I put a little pen mark because I'm in between the increments, because the increments on my saw is 1 degree. So I'm gone over, I got 49.5 marked with a pen on a piece of tape. Same way 40, 40.5, I got it marked. So now, what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be taking this. Now, if I can bring it over and show you better. So basically, that's it drawn out there. Obviously, it's not the overall length I need, but this again is only for just to show you, right? So, this here, this is what's going to be getting cut out right here. Now, I put this edge where these points are, because this is what's getting cut out. I put this in against the fence of the saw. And the reason I do that is because if I put this edge out from the fence of the saw, my saw is not going to reach properly. Not on these degrees with a 12-inch sliding compound miter saw, which I got. A bigger one, you will. But I'll be putting these points, this edge, in against the fence. Now again, power tools, make sure you wear your safety glasses, understand your power tool, make sure your electricity is all good. We don't want nothing happening to anybody. So understand how all of that works before you start. Now, where I'm using the miter saw, you got to make sure that your saw is dead square. So I uses this small slide square, and I basically squares up my saw. I always double check to make sure. So what I do is I take the blade here and the tongue here, and I put the tongue against the fence. I put my blade down and lock it in place. Now, when you're doing all this, you shouldn't have the saw plugged in, but I got it plugged in just for, because the light, I got the light on mine and I can see better. So you put the tongue against the fence, the body comes out against your blade, and you just slide in, making sure you hits all of the flat part of the blade. Don't let any part of the square touch the teeth of the blade, because you won't get an accurate. And right now, I'm perfect that way. I'm 100% square, 90 degrees, to the fence, to the saw. There's a bit of work to setting up a saw to make sure it's in place right. But if you want to be 100% accurate, you've got to take the time and do all of these adjustments. And I'll let you know that I did prove to a DeWalt sales rep that when these saws comes out of the box and you put them, you assemble them to start using them, they're not 100% square. So on 12 inches, depending on what you're building, on 12 inches is okay for if you're cutting off 2x4 and stuff, 2x6. But if you got a piece of stuff that's 10, 12 inches and you make that cut and that saw's off from the front to the back, you could be out anywhere from a 32nd to 1/8 of an inch, depending on how much it's at a square. Depending on what you're building, that's going to determine if you got a tight fit or if you got wood filler. Tight fits are always better. And then you also got your bevels, but we're not using the bevels, so we're not going to be touching on that today. So I'm going to start off, and I'm going to start with 40.5 degrees, which is there. I'm going to put it I might have to adjust the saw a little bit to stand. Yeah, you got to come up a bit. There we go. Then hold that up. Now, I got my lines there. Now, don't cut on the wrong side of the line, because the kerf of my blade is 3/32 of an inch. Now the kerf is the thickness that the blade cuts when it's cutting. That's how much material you lose. And again, that could shag you up with all of your cuts. On this case, where I got my diagonals here like this, I'm going to be cutting on the inside of the lines, and that's going to leave here, because this is what we need. So I'm going to be cutting here on this side of the lines. And if you want to, you can, so you never shag up, you just put X's on the side of the line that you want to cut on. Now again, don't forget your safety glasses. Now make sure you keep your workpiece down tight, and you just put your wood down and you bring it into the line, put your blade down, and the teeth that's sticking out the furthest, that's what you put on the line. Now, when I'm cutting, I'm going to cut down and I'm going to gradually bring the blade out, because I don't want it to come past the line for the run. Now I'm going to do all of them angles first. Again, make sure your work is in tight to the fence. Do is I keep right back first. The saw's back as far as she can go. I get it lined up with the line. I make my cut there, and then with the blade right down, I comes out till I gets to the line. That way then I got minimum material left in the heel of this. I'm hoping when I go to build these and install them, I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to do it all on video too, and that way then you'll be able to see the steers being assembled as well, and also being put in place. I brought that one right out is because this is the one that the 1 inch comes off. So now we're going to change the angle over to 49.5 degrees. And then we'll start down here. Again, on the 1 inch. Now this one, when you're going to cut, you come on this side of the line. You don't go on that side, because then you're taking an extra 3/30 seconds off your overall height. So where we done on the out or the inside of the lines here, we're going to be on the outside of the line here. Again, keeping your wood down, keeping your material down tight. And I gotta extend this one out. And the height is okay. Flip that over. Flip that over. Now we got to take this, because we're trying to cut that out. So 49.5 degrees, you got to do the one this way. And that's going to finish cutting the bottom out. Oh, I didn't. I went the wrong way. Sorry about that. So, I'll start again, so I don't have you tangled up. So, that was the first one I cut that way. Now I'm just going to take this and spin it this way, with the lines and everything still up. Now we're going to set the blade down in that saw cut, and we're just going to finish cutting across. Now, just to double check, it should be 6 11/16. So I got to take another little bit off, because I still sees me line. There we go. 6 11/16 plus the 1 inch for the tread will be 7 11/16. Now we got to take this, put it back the way we started, and finish doing all of the rest of the rises. The runs, I'm sorry. Again, saw right back. Right back, right down, and gradually bring it ahead to match the cut of your rise cut. Now, the reason they stayed in is because on the back, oh, I forgot one. On the back, there's still a bit of material left in there, because the back don't come right out like the front do, like the top do. Turn this around, because now this is our last run, we got to cut this off here. Now we got to change and that puts us over again at 40.5 degrees. Now, that's our pretend steers cut out. Now, we got to take a handsaw and just notch them pieces out. Or, for now, don't technically have to be a handsaw. You just need to clean that out. So, I can use this oscillating saw. And I just cuts that and cleans it out and lets the blade slide in. So now when you put the steers in, that's pretty much the way the steers goes. So that's your steers. And we'll just, we got 9 inches, 9 inches, 9 inches, 9 inches. Now here, you're going to have 7 11/16, but when you put your tread on here and your tread on here, you're still going to have 7 11/16. Here, you got 6 11/16, because once your 1 inch thick goes off your tread, then you'll have your 7 11/16. So I know this is, again, I'm repeating myself, but this is only on a small scale. But if you were to look at that and then look at this, that's basically the way your steers will be. So that's how you cut out a set of steers. So the next episode is me going to be cutting all of the material out that I need for it. All of my plywood for my stringers, which again, this is called a stringer, steer stringer. I'm going to be cutting the 3/4 inch plywood for that. I'll be ripping the 1/2 inch plywood for the risers, and the 1/2 inch plywood is what will be going here, and then the 1 inch plywood for here. So you'll get to see how that's done, but this is just demonstrating on how you cut out a set of steers. Now you can Google this, you can Google it, how to build steers, but when it comes to the calculations, there's just one thing to remember, is what your maximum code for rise is, what your maximum run for, or your minimum run code is, and your minimum headroom rise code. You got to know all of that. Once you know all of that, then pretty much everything else will start falling in place when you start doing your calculations, figuring out your run, your run and your rise, and then how many rises you need to make the overall rise, and how many runs you need to make the actual overall run. So that's it for that. So I hope that helps anybody who was always wondering about how to build steers. If you want to leave me comments, please welcome to do so. Subscribe to my channel, share, like, that'd be great. I appreciate it. I hope everybody is staying safe, staying healthy, and everything is going good. And I'll see you again next time. Have a good day.